All right, got our recorder going. Okay, so in Blackboard, I just want to give you guys a clear picture of what we're looking at from now into our last class. Okay, so I'm going to go over to our to-do lists. All right, so let me click over there. And again, if you guys are, on your computers and you're wanting to follow along, you're more than welcome to do so. So let me scroll towards the bottom. We are right here. So today is the 3rd. So you can kind of see we've got, today we'll talk about that brushstrokes discussion board, and we're going to be popping into, because I just realized, yeah, that's not in there, and it should be. We'll pop over to the revision group discussion board for the synthesis essay. That's what's missing right here. I don't know what happened to it. So we're going to discuss all those things. I am going to want to take a little bit of time with each of you today. I realize that if we look at like the course schedule that's there in the syllabus, you'll notice that on May 12th, which is our very, very last day, May 12th, I have a conference with an instructor during that last class, and I will, later on tell you how that's going to work. But today, I'm going to want to do just like a quick check-in with all of you guys. Okay, so don't confuse my check-in or conference with you today thinking that it's going to take the place of what's going to happen on that very, very last class day. But, so I just want you to kind of look at this. We've got today, we meet on the 5th, we meet on the 10th, and we meet on the 12th. So we have 3 classes left together. Okay, so now's the time to power through. We're almost done with the semester, and I imagine that your other classes are going to be over right about the same time as well. So really quickly, before I forget, okay, so yes, one of your classmates popped in that question. If you guys remember from when we met last week, the original course schedule shows that journal number 5 was supposed to be due, I think, like last week even. But I wanted to make sure that we had ample time for you guys to get started on your synthesis paper. So journal number 5 will actually be due tonight, okay, by midnight. But it's a really, really easy one, and we'll go through that in class. Let me put this in here in your to-do list before I forget. Yeah, I can spell. Where did it go? Interestingly enough, the one word that I misspell most frequently when I'm typing is the word the. I just always spell it T-E-H. So go figure that one out. Okay. Okay, so yeah, not only are you going to need to complete that journal entry tonight, but you will need to get your responses into the brushstrokes discussion board and into the synthesis paper revision group. And that will just be if you're not able to complete all of that while we're here in class, okay? So I saw a couple of you comment, haha, that it's okay, you work well under pressure. If that's what works for you, great. To me, I just think it depends. Sometimes I work really well under pressure, and sometimes I just like freeze up. So I'm going to take us into the assignments tab. All right. Let's go into our synthesis paper. All right, now we worked together quite a bit as far as We worked on the prompt together. We worked on a graphic organizer together. We even created some thesis, potential thesis, working thesis statements together. We even like outlined a paragraph together last time. So don't forget that these resources are here for you. And I will repeat what I told you last week. I don't care if you guys use the similar things that are in these documents here. If all of you guys used the same thesis statement, you still would not write the same paper. So I am not worried about you guys using the thesis statements that we came up with, or because they're just working thesis statements. If you're wanting to alter them, totally up to you guys. Feel free to utilize any resources we have available. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to open our synthesis prompts and organizers here. Okay. So just as a review, okay? As far as what you guys need to make sure you have for this paper, okay? Hold on. There's also... Okay. I see a question that's popped through here. If you hang on a second, I might actually address that when I go through this, okay? And if I don't, I'll come back to it. So, synthesis paper. So remember, we had our textual analysis. Our textual analysis is us like picking things apart and really just like looking it over, picking it clean. Whereas the synthesis paper is bringing things together, seeing what similarities are in the sources that we've read through. So we've read through 8 sources together, okay? Looking for those similarities in maybe the tones that the authors used or some of the points that they brought out. Those are just some general ideas. But you guys have to write a 4 to 6 page paper. So you have to have 4 to 6 pages of writing. So that 4 pages doesn't include your sources page. That's in addition. You're going to pop that in there, okay? I want at least 4 pages of writing. Really, really look at our course questions. Remember, we have 5 course questions there in our language folder. And you're probably getting irritated because I keep reading these to you over and over, but they're important. So, reminder, the 5 questions. How do humans across time, cultures, genders, ages, abilities, and socioeconomic levels differ in how they use language? Or, in your opinion, do they not? If they don't, then you could address that in your paper. How does language influence and or reflect the development of one's identity, sense of power, powerlessness, or worldview? Every time I read that question, I totally think of the Mr. Rogers article. Okay, so you should start, as we're reading through these questions, you should really start being able to think of the sources and be like, oh yeah, that source would kind of answers this question, that source. So kind of have that perspective. What aspect of language do you find under-examined or commonly overlooked by modern society? Okay, again, when I read that question, I think of the American Sign Language one. It was a harder read, but I really feel like I could link it to that question. How have the sources and different perspectives on the topic shaped your opinions about language? And what would you say to someone who asked you the most important lessons you have learned about language to this point in your life? Okay, so the last 2 aren't necessarily in regards to any sources. They're your opinions. They're your reflections, okay? Okay, so you are required to have at least 4 sources. Okay, you have to have at least 4. At least 3 of the 4 need to be out of our sources folder. Okay, so at least 3 of them have to be one of the sources that we've read together as a class. And then your 4th one you can go get from like the NWTC library, or you can do some searching on your own. But you have to have at least 4 sources. Now, Can you have more than 4 sources? Sure, absolutely. I would tell you, since this is only a 4 to 6 page paper, I would encourage you to not have more than 6 sources. Only because the ratio of sources to writing, the sources are going to overtake your writing. So be very careful, okay? Okay, let's see here. I'm just looking at some of the questions. I've gotten to one of them. One of them I haven't gotten to yet. Let me ask for a clarification on a question. So give me a second. Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to get clarification on some of your questions here. Because I want to make sure you feel comfortable with what you are working on and make sure you guys understand what is expected of you. Okay, so I'm going to hopefully address one of the questions that came through in regarding thesis statements. So I want you to reflect back on our graphic organizer and think about your introductory paragraph. Your introductory paragraph, we always encourage you to start with what we call a hook, okay? So that hook is the interest grabber. It could be you sharing a quote from one of the sources that you found. It could be you sharing a personal experience, just something to grab your reader's attention. Some individuals, some writers use rhetorical questions in the beginning of their paragraph to make your reader be an active participant. So as soon as they start reading, you're asking them questions, and in their mind, they're answering it. So that's another good way of grabbing your reader and getting them interested. And then from there, maybe you could, give some explanation. You could tell us something about language. I don't know what direction you're going to go to within your paper, but you go from that hook to that explanation, which bridges to your topic, which takes you to your thesis statement. So can your thesis statement be, let me see, can your thesis statement be something that grabs your reader's attention? Absolutely. But I discourage you from putting your thesis statement at the very, very beginning of your introductory paragraph, okay? Your thesis statement does need to be interesting, but you shouldn't be relying on that to be the thing to grab your reader, okay? Grab your reader another way, then bridge to your topic, and then mention your thesis statement, okay? All right, so let's see here. I'm looking at some of the other questions. Okay, so this is a good question. One of your classmates wants to know if a dictionary counts as a source. Yes, it actually does count as a source. You can use, if you're trying to define some of the terminology that's in our sources, absolutely use the dictionary as a source, but make sure you cite that source, okay? So if you use the dictionary to help define one of our terms, you need to include an in-text citation to that dictionary page, or wherever you found that, and you need to have that source listed on your works cited page. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so hang on a second. Okay. Sorry. It's one of those things that's easier when you guys are in class because I can just, get that clarification right away. But I think the chat box is a nice option for you guys because I think, this is just my opinion, I think there's lots of times that when we're in a face-to-face class, you guys don't ask the questions that I want you to ask. Like, I think you maybe are hesitant to ask the questions, whereas with this chat box, you feel more comfortable because you have that direct line of communication with me. So that is one of the things that I will miss about the virtual format is having that opportunity to use the chat box. So, okay. I'm just thinking here. Do you guys have any other questions regarding the synthesis essay? As of right now. You may think of questions later, but as of right now, do you have any other questions? Okay. And one of your classmates says, never a stupid question. My dad was a teacher for, I think, he was a teacher for over 40 years. And as luck would have it, I actually had him in junior high as my pre-algebra teacher. And I think I've already established I'm terrible at math. And yeah, it wasn't my favorite thing in the world. But he was my pre-algebra teacher. And I hated asking questions because I felt so stupid. But he had a sign in his classroom and he kept it in there in every classroom he ever taught in, because he went from junior high to elementary, back to junior high, even some high school. And the sign actually said there's no such thing as a dumb question. Now, of course, we took that as a challenge to try to ask dumb questions. But I appreciate the sentiment. There really isn't a dumb question because most of the time when you guys have a question, you're thinking of something that I haven't thought of yet. Or maybe I thought that I mentioned it in a past class or before, and I didn't. So your questions and your requests for clarification, they help you, they help me, and they help your classmates. So please don't ever be afraid to ask me a question or point something out or whatever, okay? All right. And that's usually what happens. Someone has the same question, but they're just too shy to ask. Okay, we're going to pop back over to Blackboard. Here's what I want to do. Let us go to the discussion board. Okay. I don't know why, but it's like I just felt like a groan come through the screen somehow. Okay, we're scrolling down to all the way down to almost the very bottom. All right, to the synthesis paper revision group, okay? Now, there's 3 drafts. So obviously there's not a draft from everybody on the board. We roll with it, right? We're just going to roll with it. So we're going to take some time and we're going to go through these drafts here. I'm going to give us, like we always do, our usual kind of format here. Take some time in class to allow you guys to read through and provide feedback. Because otherwise your 2 responses are due by midnight tonight. But if you get them done in class, woohoo, that's one less thing you have to worry about. So this revision group is going to be just a touch different than we've done with some of the other revision groups where, like you focus on 2 positives, 2 suggestions. For this paper, for this draft, I should say, we're not expecting a complete 4 pages. So don't go in reading the drafts thinking you need to tell them, this is good, but it's not complete. Well, they probably already know that if it's only 2 pages. So don't worry about that aspect of it. But I do want you to look at the drafts that are there. And I want you to kind of go through, I only have 4 questions really listed here. I want to make sure that you can identify the thesis. So when you're commenting in your feedback back to your classmates, I want you to literally tell them, this is what I think your thesis is, and then name it. Because as a writer, if I have a reader who thinks a line that is not my thesis is my thesis, I may need to really look at the way that I have written my paper, okay? So when you're providing the feedback, identify that thesis statement and restate it back to them, okay? That's helpful, trust me. I want you to go and look through how many sources they have, okay? And what we really want to look for is in however many pages they have, look at those in-text citations, or, make sure that the sources are being used properly in the paper to the best of your knowledge. Okay, you don't have to be experts here, that's fine. Read all the way through, offer them some suggestions. Maybe they have a paragraph that's really short, and maybe the reason that the paragraph is short is because they're not quite sure how to develop it a little bit more. So if you have suggestions, hey, in paragraph 4, it'd be really cool if you shared the example of how Mr. Rogers created a whole new language or approach to language to talk to children, and we call that Freddish. Just things like that. Again, really, really help your classmates to offer those suggestions. And as always, any positives that you want to share with your classmates. We all like to hear nice things about ourselves. So never, ever, ever shy away from sharing a compliment, especially to your classmates in their writing, okay? Here's what I want to do. Okay, so we've got 3 drafts that are listed there on the discussion board. I want you to get to at least 2, but if in the time allotted you can get to 3, we would all love that, including the individuals who have posted it on the discussion board, because at least in my mindset, the more feedback I can get, the better off I am when I go through to continue to write and when I have to edit, okay? So let's look here. Just kind of keeping an eye on time. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to say at 1:22, I'll give you another weird number, and I'm going to write it down, otherwise I'll forget. At 1:22, I will turn my mic back on and check in with you guys, because as always, I'm going to turn my video off. I'm going to turn my mic off because I look through the discussion boards as well. So at 1:22, I'm going to turn my mic back on and check in with you guys and see if you need more time, okay? Do you guys have any questions on what I want you to do with the synthesis paper revision group discussion board? Okay, let's go ahead and get started on that. I'm going to turn my camera off. I will end up turning my mic off, and let's get started. I will check in with you at 1:22. Feel free to use the chat box to ask me any questions that you guys may come across as you are reading through these drafts, okay? Okay, so let's go back into Blackboard. Really good job. The drafts that I read, it looks like, so if you guys remember from the assignment details, you have 2 ways that you can approach the paper. You can approach it as what we call a survey, otherwise could be known as a informative paper. So basically you're just kind of taking us through your points. Otherwise you can turn it into a persuasive paper if you wanted to. Maybe you completely disagreed with the way that a couple of the sources approached something, and so you wanted to try to persuade your reader that these individuals are wrong and here's why they're wrong. But from what I can tell, it looks like you guys are going about it the informative way, which is totally cool because it was one of your options. I'm going to take you back into the assignments folder. Here to our synthesis paper again, because I do want to make sure, I don't think we've gone through this in class. There is this folder. I know it says examples, but there's only one example in there. So there is a health and society synthesis paper, but I wanted to load it up. So it is a student's paper. Okay, so with that in mind, we know that it is not a perfect paper, but it's a good example. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. All right, so this has been shared by Dr. O'Brien. He is one of the department heads for English Comp. So he was kind enough to share one of his student examples with us. Obviously, the names have been changed to protect their identity. I do not believe that Dr. O'Brien had Daisy Duck in his class, though that would be kind of cool and highly unusual. Okay, so I'm going to zoom this just a little bit. So the course topic that, one of the course topics that he likes to use, that Dr. O'Brien likes to use, is the one regarding health. So that you have to keep that in mind. The course questions for the health topic are going to be a little bit different than the questions regarding our language topic. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm just going to read through a couple of things just so you can kind of see how this student approached the synthesis essay. Okay, so the obesity epidemic, why is America so fat? So it's it's an eye-catching title, right? Just the whole why is America so fat is going to grab your attention. Some of us might be even insulted by reading the title. Okay. So our course questions this semester focus on the issue of health and society, specifically the nature and causes of the obesity epidemic in our society. So the way this student did was, because of the way one of the questions was formatted, it specifically addressed cultural, discourse, and personal. So this student was just identifying that nature and causes of the obesity epidemic in society would be the cultural part of it. How we talk about it is the discourse part of it. And talking about like bizarre exercise programs and fitness celebrities falls under personal. Okay, so that's why those parentheses are there. One of our sources laid the groundwork of the numbers related to obesity. It said that since 1980, worldwide obesity rates have doubled. In fact, almost 40% of adults were overweight in 2014. So that student did a really good job paraphrasing some information from this source right here, the obesity and overweight. Okay, so not a super long line, but good information. Just kind of paraphrased it. So nice job. This is obviously a dramatic number, but as we read our sources this semester, I noticed that experts disagree about the cases of this epidemic. They said that things like the introduction of high fructose corn syrup, increased sugar intake, increased daily caloric intake, a less active lifestyle due to technology and television, and marketing of poor food choices are relevant factors in the obesity epidemic. I agree that these are important issues, but I will argue, okay, so there's a key term right there. We know that this paper is not going to be just an informative paper. It's going to be a persuasive paper, okay? Because our author is telling us, I will argue. Okay, I will argue that other issues are just as important, including genetics and, most importantly, the increase in highly processed, ready-to-eat foods. Okay, so to me, these two statements right here. So this is my answer to our first course question about the most significant factors in society affecting obesity rates, and I will focus most specifically on this question in this paper. So the first sentence to me is what I would classify as the thesis statement. The second sentence is more of a qualifier. It's not quite a thesis map, but it does kind of whittle it down and tell our reader, hey, this is specifically what I'm going to focus on. Okay. But overall, it's a really good example. Like I said, this student used a persuasive and argumentative technique. So you can kind of keep that in mind as you read through there. But it's really good organization, great use of sources. Okay. One thing that I liked that this student did, and I will encourage you to try to do this in your papers, is that they didn't just use one source in one paragraph. I want to see you guys stretch yourselves a little bit and use a couple of sources in one paragraph. Just try it. Just try to compare some of the points or show how two sources made some similar points. So yeah, stretch yourselves a little bit. See if you can do it, okay? So yeah, but great organization, great use of sources. And look, they used an image. You may also use an image if you would like to, but please make sure that you cite your source if you use an image. I'm thinking of, well, let me see. It's how talking about the coronavirus as an enemy combatant. That one has like those whoa pictures, you know, the really, really powerful pictures. So depending on how you approached your paper, maybe you want to portray how images relay a message without words and how they can be powerful. And you could share an image, but you need to cite the image, okay? And if you use an image, notice, I'm going to zoom out just really quickly so you can kind of see the full page here. Okay. This image is maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of the page, okay? Sorry, I'm reading your comments. So if you are going to use an image, you cannot like spread it out to the full page. Don't go more than 1/4 to 1/3, okay? So sorry, I know. So tempting though, right? And also, if you do plan to use an image in your paper, because this is a shorter paper, I would encourage you to use no more than 2 images, okay? Otherwise, it just kind of takes over your paper. So please don't use any more than 2 images. Yeah, but this paper is a good example of how to use images. You'll notice, let me go back up to this part right here on the paper, okay? So in this paragraph, the student is talking about like high fructose corn syrup and, you know, all of that stuff and like what it does to your system. But you'll notice the student doesn't talk about all this and then all of a sudden just like chucks an image in and then continues on topic. The student took the time to give the explanation, and you can say, the chart below demonstrates the momentous shift in sweetener availability between blah, 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 blah. Okay. So before you even share the picture, you need to give us some background to lead into the picture, then share the picture. Obviously make sure to cite your source. And then depending on how you want to use it, maybe you want to explain a little bit more about it, however you want to do that. But please don't just smack a picture in there because you're like, oh, I got to use up some space. You actually have to give an explanation and then a lead in before you put that picture in there. Okay? All right. And you have to make sure that your picture is related to your thesis statement, okay? How does the image help strengthen the information that you're sharing in your paper, okay? So again, don't just like go smacking pictures in your paper. That it has to it has to be effectively used, okay? All right. Do you guys have any questions regarding your synthesis paper then? Oh, I know what I was going to show you. I got sidetracked by images. I'm going to keep scrolling. Yeah, this student actually wrote not quite 6 pages. So if I recall correctly, everybody in this class is using MLA8 formatting. So please remember, you have your works cited page at the very end. It's its own separate page. You have all of your sources on the page. Okay, this student used a lot of sources. Just personally, I think that's too many sources for a 6-page paper. However, I guess depending on how you approach it, it would be okay. But if you were going to use that many sources, I want to see 2 and 3 sources in one paragraph. I want to see some good comparison. So make sure you have your works cited, separate page. Make sure you have the title up at the top. We don't bold it. It's not bigger, it's just plain. Make sure to alphabetize your sources and make sure to include that hanging indent, okay? Now, I don't remember if I ever showed you guys the tool in Word. So I'm going to open up a new document here. And let's say I am creating my works cited page, okay? It has to be centered. I need to make sure that my paper is double spaced, right? Paragraph. Single space, right now I want double space. Okay, so now I'm double spaced. All right, I'm gonna make sure I start over here. So we have your sources all set up in the sources folder. All you have to do is copy and paste the citations, right? So if I copy, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to come over into the sources folder. And I'm going to go to, we call Workers Essential. And because I'm using the MLA format, I'm going to make sure that I choose the MLA citation. All right, so I'm going to copy, which on my computer is Command C. On PC computers, it's Control C. And then you do Control V. It'll think about it for a second. Okay, now notice, that's not what I want my citation to look like. So anytime I plunk my citations in there, there's always some paste options. So if you click on that, I want it to match the destination formatting, which will match the font, the spacing, and it'll get rid of that grayed out thing. Have you guys noticed that when you copy from the sources folder and you paste it into your document, there's like this weird gray background to it. So always choose to match the destination formatting. Okay, so that's better. I got my font, I have my double space, but I need my hanging indent. Okay, if you guys are using Microsoft Word, there's a special tool in Word that, believe it or not, has not always been there. It's fairly, I say fairly new. It's only been in the past 5 years, 6 years, maybe it's longer, that it's in there, okay? Oh, hey, one of your other classmates, one of your fellow classmates offered this helpful hint that you can also do Control Space will help you get rid of the gray background. Okay, so another option. So I need a hanging indent. So I'm going to highlight my citation. I always right click with my mouse because I use a mouse. If you have a little trackpad, you can do the same thing, whatever your right click is classified as. Go to your paragraph options. Now, usually we focus on the spacing, but you'll notice there's this indentation option here in your paragraph. okay? If you click under special, hanging. Hey, the hanging indent's right there. So if you click on hanging, click OK, it now has the hanging indent for you. Okay, kind of cool. What I want you to make sure you do is, so I'm just pasting it again. I want you to make sure that it's always lined up right here. Sometimes what happens as you guys continue to paste and get them in there, all of a sudden, like, it messes up and it tries to line up way over here. Your first line needs to be lined up right there, no matter what. So let me go my hanging indent again. See how pretty that looks? The weird things that I enjoy here. So those first lines are completely justified to the left, okay? So please make sure as you are continuing to work on your synthesis paper and you're adding those sources to your Works Cited page, make sure you're formatting everything correctly, okay? Excuse me, okay. Any questions? Synthesis paper questions? Sources questions? I'm trying to think of anything else. Be thinking. If you can think of any, make sure you pop them in the chat box, even if we start discussing something else. I want to be able to answer your questions. Right now, however, I'm going to have you guys get up and walk away from your computers for a few moments, okay? So let's do this. All right, I'm looking at my time here. I see some celebration that there's break time. Let's take a 12-minute break, kind of our usual. And then we will be talking about something else when we come back. But if you think of any more synthesis questions, pop them in the chat box. So I will see you guys in 12 minutes. I wanted to take us into Blackboard and just point out a resource for you or remind you that it's there. Remember that we have this MLA 8, APA 7 help tab, okay? So refer back to that whenever necessary. But I wanted to point out that I do, in fact, have a link here under that tab for how to cite an image. So because I think you guys are excited now that I showed you that example and you're like, woohoo, I can put an image in there. And you can just make sure you cite it. But if you're unsure, make sure to go to our little help tab here and then look at this link and it will show you how to cite your image, okay, according to MLA 8. So just making sure you remember that that's there, okay? All right, so here is what I want to do. I want to introduce our next, sorry, I'm trying to click these over here. I want to introduce your next journal entry, the one that I kind of put off because I had wanted you to focus on your synthesis paper. It's not a hard journal entry, okay? So let's go ahead and click on journal entry number 5. Journal entry number 5 is a growing reader, writer, thinker, and researcher, okay? That's the name of this journal entry. Pretty low key. This is all about you. This is you kind of reflecting on yourself, okay? So this journal entry is about your development as a reader, writer, thinker, and researcher, okay? You will have another opportunity to comment on the ideas discussed below in your theory of writing essay. That's your very, very last essay that you guys will have to write. And your theory of writing essay really is an essay about you, okay? So this is kind of your opportunity to brainstorm a little bit before you even have to start on that essay. So what do you need to do for this entry? 2 things, okay? 2 paragraphs. First paragraph, I want you to comment on your approach as a reader, writer, thinker, and researcher. Kind of just tell us what that approach is. And then, and when I say us, I mean me, because I'm the only one that's going to read these. How has that changed in the first half of the class? Okay, so think of maybe how you started the class. What are some of your changes here? Okay, in the second paragraph, I want you to comment on areas where you think you need to develop more as a reader, writer, thinker, and researcher. Okay, so what you think you want to develop a little bit more for this next little bit of class. I mean, we only have a few sessions left. This is where this journal entry is kind of weird when it's an 8-week format. But think about for these last 2 papers that we're writing and beyond, what do you think or what do you feel like you need to develop more to be that better reader, writer, thinker, researcher? Okay. 2 paragraphs, total self-reflection. Feel free to give me some examples if you want to, because I want each paragraph to be 6 to 10 sentences long. Okay, so 2 paragraphs, each paragraph at least 6 sentences long, but it's all self-reflection. You don't have to go find anything, but feel free to give examples that would probably help you build those paragraphs a little bit. Okay, this is due by midnight, but you're going to have some time. Okay, so that's due by midnight. Sorry, I feel like a sneeze tickling my nose. If that happens, I'll make sure I mute everything. Okay. The other thing that is due by midnight, you guys have to respond to 2 people on the synthesis essay or synthesis paper revision group discussion board. But I think you guys accomplished that in class. So woohoo, one thing you don't have to worry about. The other thing that's due by midnight, let's go to the discussion board. I'm going to scroll down to the brush strokes discussion board. All right. Okay, so the brushstrokes discussion board, you guys had to write those little stories or use the stories that you already had, and then just either point out brushstrokes that you already used or alter it to add the brushstrokes. So by midnight, I want you to go and look at 2 of your classmates' stories, their little mini stories, and I want you to add 1 brushstroke to their story. Okay, it could be the beginning, middle, end, whatever. But I want you to add 1 brushstroke. Make sure you identify what brushstroke you are using. Okay, remember we had the 5 brushstrokes, and if you need the refresher, these were the slideshows that we went, the slides that we went through in class, and then there's also Noden's breakdown of the 5 brushstrokes. Okay, so by midnight tonight, 2 responses to the revision group discussion board for the synthesis paper, journal entry number 5, and 2 responses on the brushstrokes discussion board. Okay, do you guys have any questions on those 3 things that need to be done by midnight tonight? Okay. And, oh, thank you. I was just looking down at my paper. Okay. Yes, there are 4 things due tonight. They're actually right here on my paper. The 4th thing is the final draft of your annotated bibliography is due tonight. Okay, so 4 things. Always helps to look at your lesson plans, doesn't it? So 2 others on the brushstrokes discussion board. Journal entry number 5, annotated bibliography, source 4, final draft. And remember that the final draft needs to have all of the sources on one draft. Okay. And then respond to 2 on the synthesis paper revision group discussion board. Okay. Now, we have a good chunk of class left, but here's how I want to utilize that chunk of class. Oh yes, so the annotated bibliography, remember it's right over here in the assignments folder. I gotta scroll all the way up. So we got assignment, annotated bibliography, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, the assignment submission for source 4 is right there. Okay. All right, so here is what I would like to do for the time that we have left. I want to touch base with each one of you to discuss your synthesis paper and even where you are in the grade book, okay? And so to do that, what I am going to ask you guys to do is nobody leave class, okay? I will end up taking one of you at a time and just putting you and I in a breakout group. So that way we can talk privately, just the 2 of us, and we can look over things, okay? So while I have one individual that I'm discussing with, the rest of you, I just want you to be working on one of those 4 things that are due tonight, okay? So that way I get an opportunity to discuss with you, make sure we have a plan, we know what's going on, but then you can still utilize this class time to work on those 4 things, okay? So I have my list. So the person that I'm going to take first is Haley. What I'm going to end up doing is pause my recording.